My gaming addiction destroyed my marriage and left my family in ruins. Now I don't know what to do. My husband and I have always had a wonderful relationship. We met in college while studying technology-related degrees, and from the beginning, we bonded over our shared love for video games. I still remember our early dates playing on his old Nintendo 64, competing in Mario Kart. Over time, our collection of consoles and games grew. My favorite franchise was Final Fantasy, and I never missed a single release. Video games have always been a big part of our life together. Fast forward to today, we have a family with two amazing kids, aged 8 and 10. My husband works as a data analyst for a telecommunications company, a demanding job that keeps him in front of his computer for long hours analyzing trends. As for me, I work from home as a programmer, which gives me the flexibility to handle the kids' schedules and take care of the house. I'm usually the one who drops them off and picks them up from school, prepares meals, and helps with homework. Since we got married, we've always been disciplined about saving money, some for emergencies and some for our annual family vacation. It was a tradition we all looked forward to, a time to unplug from work and responsibilities and simply enjoy being together. Despite our busy lives, my husband and I always made time to indulge in our shared love for video games. Often, we'd play co-op games in the living room with the kids. Those moments were incredible, and I wish I could bring them back. A few months ago, I discovered a new mobile game that got me really excited. It was based on my favorite franchise and involved recruiting heroes from the series to complete missions. For those unfamiliar, this type of game is called a gacha game, where characters are obtained randomly, and the rarest ones have very low drop rates. Each attempt to get a character requires pulls, which can be earned gradually by playing or purchased with real money. From the moment I downloaded it, I was hooked. The idea of collecting my favorite characters from the franchise and battling with them was thrilling. At first, I only played during my free time, making sure not to let it interfere with my work or family. I managed to balance everything while still enjoying the game. But as I progressed, my enthusiasm grew, especially when new events and characters were announced. One day, a special event was launched. One of my all-time favorite characters was finally available. I had been saving my pulls for this moment and was beyond excited. My husband, who didn't play this particular game, knew all about the event because I couldn't stop talking about it. He listened patiently as I explained the character's abilities and why they meant so much to me. The day of the event, I stayed in our room with my heart racing. I had saved 45 pulls and was hopeful I'd get the character. My husband was cooking with our kids while I updated him on the results of each pull. One by one, they failed. At first, I wasn't too worried. After all, I knew the odds were low. But as I ran out of pulls, anxiety and frustration started to set in. I kept telling myself, the next one will be it, but every time a different character appeared, I felt a sting of disappointment. Eventually, I ran out of pulls and didn't get the hero I wanted. Seeing other players announce their success and receive congratulations in the game's chat made me feel desperate. How was it that everyone else was getting the character except me? The idea of missing out after waiting so long felt unbearable. There was a strange emptiness inside me, as if I had lost something that had suddenly become crucial. On impulse, I decided to buy a pull package. Since 45 pulls hadn't been enough, I went for a 100 pull bundle that cost $100. I justified it to myself, thinking, I deserve this. I work hard, and this will be the only money I spend on the game. After 60 more pulls, I finally got the hero I wanted. I screamed in excitement and ran to show my husband the character I had been dreaming of. He smiled, congratulated me, and told me to sit down for dinner. That night, as we lay in bed and I continued playing with my new character, leveling them up, my husband asked how many pulls it had taken to get them. Nervously, I admitted I had spent real money but lied, saying it was only $20. He didn't seem upset, and we moved on to other topics before falling asleep. Still, the lie weighed on me. I felt ashamed of how much I had actually spent. It wasn't that we couldn't afford it. I had charged it to my credit card, and I knew I could pay it off. But I promised myself it would be the last time I spent money on the game. In the weeks following that first purchase, I made sure to pay off the $100 I had charged to my credit card. I continued playing the game peacefully, enjoying it without spending any more money. Every week, the game introduced new heroes, weapons, or special costumes, but I stayed firm, saving my pulls just in case an event came along that truly interested me. Things at home were going smoothly. Our kids were happy and thriving in their activities. My younger son had recently started playing baseball and was thrilled about his new friends and practices. My husband and I kept enjoying our gaming nights together. Although he wasn't interested in the mobile game I was playing, he still supported my hobby, understanding how much I enjoyed it. It felt good to have that kind of encouragement from him. About a month later, a new heroine was announced in the game, another one of my all-time favorite characters. This time, I felt more confident. I had managed to save 70 pulls and was ready to try my luck again. When the day of the event arrived, I could barely contain my excitement. I explained to my husband how this new heroine would be perfect alongside my previously acquired character. Together, they would make a powerful team for battles against other players, helping me climb the rankings and earn better rewards. As I prepared to start pulling, I felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. What if I couldn't get her? The thought made me uneasy, but I reassured myself that I had saved enough pulls. This time, luck was on my side. I managed to obtain the heroine I wanted in less than 30 pulls. Overjoyed, I jumped up, screaming with excitement, and immediately ran to my husband to show him. Look, I got her, and I didn't spend a single penny this time, I said proudly. He smiled, genuinely happy for me, and told me to keep enjoying the game. In the following weeks, my attachment to the game grew stronger. Its competitive aspect kept pulling me in, and I started playing at every opportunity one got. With my two favorite characters, I was now winning more matches and climbing the ranks steadily. One Saturday, the game hosted an online tournament. During the event, every match played would earn points, and players would be ranked based on their scores, with amazing rewards for the top players. Motivated by the chance to win, I decided to participate and give it my all. Meanwhile, my husband and kids were busy setting up for a family movie night. It was something we had planned a few days earlier, and the kids were especially excited about it. My eldest daughter came to my room to let me know they were ready to start. I told her, just give me a minute, I'm almost done with this match. But as the minutes passed, the kids started to get restless. My husband eventually came over to check what was taking so long. At that moment, I was caught up in the tournament. I had won a few matches and lost others, and the pressure to perform well was mounting. The event was time-limited, and I knew that if I didn't accumulate enough points, I wouldn't qualify for any of the prizes. When my husband asked me about the delay, frustration got the worst of me. I snapped and raised my voice. I said I'm almost done. As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. I quickly apologized, feeling embarrassed about my outburst. My husband didn't say anything, but he walked back to the living room with the kids. I finished my match as quickly as I could, then joined them for the movie. Later, I apologized to my husband and explained that the tournament had been very competitive, but in the end, I had managed to win some good rewards. He accepted my apology, but reminded me not to neglect the kids. I promised to be more careful in the future. A week later, a new essential character was introduced to the game. This character's abilities were perfect for the strategy one had been using. I knew I had to get it if I wanted to maintain my position in the rankings. Lately, I had been struggling to win matches. Since I didn't have many saved pulls, I convinced myself that spending another $100 was completely justified. After all, I had already paid off all my debts. That day, my husband took the kids out for a walk, but I stayed home, claiming I was too tired to go. With the house all to myself, I prepared for the event. I pulled out my credit card and bought 100 pulls. This time, luck wasn't on my side. I got many good characters, including a duplicate of my previous heroine, which would make her stronger, but I didn't get the new character. I felt a wave of anxiety, almost panic. Determined, I bought another 100 pulls, spending another $100. Still, I had no luck. With every failed pull, the feeling of dread grew heavier. I had to get this character. I bought 100 more pulls. Finally, I got it. In total, it took me 230 pulls to get the character. At first, I felt a rush of euphoria. I had done it. But almost immediately, guilt set in. I had just spent $300 on a game in a single day. I tried to justify it, telling myself that this would allow me to stay competitive, but deep down, I couldn't shake the shame. I promised myself I wouldn't spend any more money until I paid off this expense. That day, I didn't tell my husband about the game's events. I went to bed early, skipping my usual matches. Writing this now, I can see how destructive my actions were. But back then, I couldn't recognize it. In the weeks that followed, I started making small, recurring purchases of $20 or $50 to take advantage of upgrade packs the game offered. These expenses quickly added up, but I kept convincing myself they were manageable and necessary to stay competitive. Then, a special event arrived in the game. A new character was introduced along with a reward for reaching certain numbers of pulls. At 500 pulls, the ultimate prize was an exclusive outfit for the new character. I was determined to get the character, though I told myself I wouldn't spend money on the outfit. Even though my husband hadn't said anything, I could tell he wasn't happy with how much time I was spending on the game. I started hiding my gaming sessions, suggesting family outings, and then backing out at the last minute, claiming I didn't feel well, so I could stay home and play. On the day of the event, I didn't hesitate. I spent $200 without a second thought to try to get the character, but I didn't succeed. The anxiety was unbearable. I spent another $200 and finally got the character after 370 pulls. Once again, the euphoria was short-lived, replaced by overwhelming guilt and worry. Then, a notification popped up in the game. I was only 130 pulls away from earning the exclusive outfit. I already had 30 pulls saved, so another $100 would get me the outfit. If I didn't seize this opportunity, all the money I had spent so far would feel wasted. That night, my husband found me looking down and depressed. Thinking I still wasn't feeling well, he and the kids went out of their way to take care of me, which only deepened my guilt. The worst part came about a week later when I received my credit card statement. In less than a month, I had spent over $900. It felt like my world was falling apart. How could I have spent so much? I had no way to pay off that amount while still contributing to our household expenses. If I didn't pay on time, the bank would likely call our house, and my husband might find out everything. In the end, I decided to take the money from our savings account, promising myself I'd replace it as soon as possible. But a few weeks later, my husband approached me one night and asked about the missing money. He had been checking the account balances to plan our family vacation for the year. Panicked, I told him that my best friend had a serious problem and needed the money, so I lent it to her from our savings because she promised to pay it back the following week. I apologized for not telling him and assured him the money would be back in the account soon. My husband told me not to worry, that everything was fine. To cover the missing amount, I used my credit card again. Combined with the ongoing expenses from the game, I was left with less than $500 of available credit. The situation was becoming worrisome, but I convinced myself that I'd be able to balance everything out in a few months. From this point on, things began to spiral out of control. First, it was my husband's birthday. As part of our tradition, I took the family to a nice restaurant for dinner. I was supposed to cover the bill that night, but since I didn't have enough credit available, I excused myself to go to the restroom and withdrew more money from the savings account to pay off my card. Despite promising myself I wouldn't spend any more on the game, I continued buying small packages. These small purchases added up by the end of each month. Any excuse seemed valid. A new character would be introduced, and I'd spend $200 to $300. Special promotions? Another $100. A surprise event? Another $200. It seemed like I was incapable of controlling myself. The anxiety of not getting the latest items was overwhelming. I felt as if losing my competitive edge would render everything I'd already spent worthless. And the more I spent, the worse I felt, which only made me spend even more. At work, I started having more problems, and my mood became increasingly irritable. The same was true with my husband. Whenever he tried to talk to me, I'd blame my stress on an important project I was working on. One day, I lost track of time because I was distracted by a game event where my ranking was on the line. That's when I got a call from my husband. Annoyed, I answered, telling him I was busy, but he told me the kids' teacher had called, wondering why I hadn't picked them up from school yet. That night, my husband reprimanded me. He said he understood I might be busy with work, but in those situations, I should call him so he could pick up the kids. Frustrated, I snapped back, saying it was easy for him to complain since he wasn't the one responsible for picking them up every day. The argument dragged on. I was furious, but deep down, I was mad at myself. Yet I took it out on him. We went to bed upset with each other. Things didn't improve much in the months that followed. I failed to complete a major project on time, and the client canceled it, putting me in a precarious position at work. My relationship with my husband didn't improve either. We stopped talking or playing games together. On weekends, he was the one taking care of the kids while I avoided spending time with them. By this point, I had already dipped into our savings account a second time to cover my credit card bills. I hadn't yet replaced the money I'd taken the last time, and now I had withdrawn even more. To make matters worse, my husband's sister was getting married, which meant the whole family would have to travel across the country for the wedding. I had been thinking of suggesting a low-key vacation this year to buy time to repay the savings. But when my husband told me about the wedding, I immediately offered to cover the cost of the plane tickets myself to ensure he wouldn't look at our accounts. The truth was, I was avoiding checking how much I had spent. I kept convincing myself that, given enough time, I could fix everything. The trip the following month was a nightmare for me. My husband and the kids were in vacation mode, eager to spend on different activities and treats. I was in charge of the expenses, constantly terrified of the moment my husband would check the accounts, which he inevitably would. I even started imagining scenarios in my mind, like claiming the money had been lost, or saying I had bought something expensive that later got stolen, anything to justify the missing funds. When we returned from the trip, I handed my husband a detailed breakdown of all the expenses so he wouldn't feel the need to check anything himself. I exaggerated as much as I could, knowing that every dollar he thought we overspent on the trip would slightly reduce my actual debt. Thankfully, my husband believed me and didn't review the accounts. His trust only made me feel worse, leaving me unable to meet his eyes. Things continued to spiral downward. Week after week, I spent more and more. One day, I tried to pay the $1,600 balance on my credit card, only to discover that there wasn't enough money left in our savings account. Panic washed over me. How could there not be enough money? How was I ever going to pay everything back? In the end, I called my bank and converted my credit card debt into monthly installments. 2 weeks later, my son's teacher called me at home. My youngest had a fever and was complaining of stomach pain. At the hospital, he was diagnosed with acute appendicitis and required emergency surgery. Receiving the hospital bill felt like my sentence, $3,500. I sat in front of my computer, staring at the screen showing our bank account. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The $9,000 my husband and I had worked so hard to save was gone. On top of that, my credit card was maxed out. How am I going to explain this? The truth is, I couldn't. My husband figured it all out, and when he asked me about the money, I couldn't bring myself to answer. Eventually, I confessed everything. Over the course of 9 months, I had spent our savings on a mobile game. My husband stood there in stunned silence, unable to process what he was hearing. Then, without saying a word, he turned and left the room. I panicked, not knowing what to do. A few minutes later, he returned. His eyes were wild, and his face was red with anger. He yelled at me. He never raised his voice, but this time he shouted. He said terrible things, and he threatened me, telling me that if anything happened to our son, it would be all my fault, and he would make sure I paid for it. I don't think there's any point in detailing the rest of the argument. Our marriage was already over. I had destroyed it. In the end, my husband paid the hospital bill using his credit card and a bank loan. I was paralyzed, unable to do anything. I just sat there, frozen. One day, my husband packed up the kids and took them to his parents' house. The last thing he said to me was that I had a couple of days to move out of the house. He wanted a divorce and demanded that I pay him back his share of the savings. I suppose many people will think I have a gambling problem or some kind of gaming addiction, but I've never had any issues like that before. I've gone to casinos with my husband and have been a gamer my entire life. I just don't understand why this time it affected me so much. Now I'm living with my parents. My family is completely broken, and my husband refuses to speak to me. I don't know what to do anymore.